Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine sitting in a familiar cafe somewhere in New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. Around you, people are chatting freely. Couples are holding hands. Laughter fills the air. Men and women openly love each other without fear. Now imagine that overnight. This simple act becomes a crime. Just holding someone's hand, just a tender glance, could land you in prison for years. It sounds like a dystopian movie, doesn't it? But no. It has just become reality in Burkina Faso, a small country in the heart of West Africa. In September 2025, the military government, led by young President Ibrahim Traoré, passed a law that shocked the world. Homosexuality is now considered illegal, punishable by 2 to 5 years in prison, along with heavy fines. The reason given by the government sounds simple: to protect traditional values and family. But behind those words lies a much larger struggle between culture and human rights, between national identity and international pressure. And over the next 30 minutes, we will dive deep into this story. Not just the short headlines you've seen, but the background, the people, and the controversial choices shaping the future of a nation. The question for all of us is this: is this truly about preserving tradition, or is it a dangerous step backward for human rights? To understand why this controversial law emerged, we first need to look at the bigger picture of Burkina Faso. This is a small, landlocked country in West Africa, home to more than 20 million people. Its name, Burkina Faso, literally means the land of upright people. Yet in recent years, life here has been anything but peaceful. For more than a decade, Burkina Faso has been torn apart by terrorist violence. Armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have attacked hundreds of villages, forcing millions of people to flee their homes. Civilians live in fear, and the army is stretched to its limits. On top of this, the nation has been trapped in a cycle of political instability. In less than 3 years, Burkina Faso experienced 2 military coups, and in the 2022 coup, a new face emerged. Ibrahim Traoré, then only in his early 30s, suddenly became the youngest leader in the world. With the image of a young, decisive officer, Traoré was quickly seen by many as a symbol of hope, the man who might lead Burkina Faso out of chaos. He was even compared to Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of the 1980s, often called the Che Guevara of Africa. But admiration also came with doubts. A young soldier, lacking experience, holding absolute power. Where would he take the country? And now, just 3 years into his rule, that question seems to have found a controversial answer. A law criminalizing homosexuality, leaving the world both stunned and outraged. In September 2025, Burkina Faso's military government officially enacted a new law that captured the world's attention. The law states that all homosexual acts are illegal. Anyone found guilty could face 2 to 5 years in prison, along with heavy fines. President Ibrahim Traoré's government explained publicly that this was meant to protect family values and resist the intrusion of foreign culture. State media celebrated the decision as a victory of traditional identity against global pressure. But why would a country struggling with terrorism, poverty, and shortages choose to prioritize a law like this? Analysts suggest the answer lies more in politics than in culture. The law may help Traoré consolidate his power, gaining support from conservative and religious groups that hold significant influence in society. At the same time, it sends a defiant message. Burkina Faso will not let the West decide our values. But the question remains, is this truly about preserving tradition, or is it a political maneuver designed to distract from the deeper crises the nation is facing? When the law was announced, the streets of Ouagadougou did not erupt in loud protests the way we often see in the West. Instead, a portion of the population openly supported it. They believed it was the right decision, a way to protect traditional morality and religious values deeply woven into everyday life. Sermons in churches, prayers in mosques, many repeated the same message. A family can only begin with a man and a woman. But alongside those voices of support, there was also a chilling silence. Those who disagreed with the law mostly chose to stay quiet, knowing that any sign of opposition could be seen as defiance against the government. For the LGBT community in Burkina Faso, The law felt like a giant net tightening around them. A simple handhold, a tender glance, even a private text message could now be used as evidence. They were forced to hide even deeper, living with anxiety, fear, and a sense of isolation within their own homeland. The most striking difference is this. In the United States, or much of the West, a law like this would immediately spark protests, debates, and intense media coverage. But in Burkina Faso, silence prevailed. And sometimes, silence can be even more frightening than the sound of outrage. The moment Burkina Faso announced the law, the international reaction was almost immediate. Major human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and even the United Nations, all spoke out, calling it a dangerous setback for human rights in Africa. From Washington to Paris to Brussels, diplomatic statements poured in, urging Ibrahim Traoré's government to repeal the law. Some Western countries even warned that international aid and economic cooperation could be cut if the law remained in place. This is not the first time the world has seen something like this. Think back to Uganda in 2014. When that country passed its anti-gay law, the US and the European Union immediately cut hundreds of millions of dollars in aid, plunging Uganda's economy into crisis. Now, Burkina Faso faces the risk of repeating that same scenario. A nation already struggling with poverty could pay an even heavier price if isolated economically and diplomatically. Yet for Ibrahim Traoré's supporters, the fierce backlash from the West only reinforces their belief that he is on the right path. We have the right to define our own values, not the West. The world condemns, but in the eyes of many Burkinabe citizens, that condemnation becomes proof that they are resisting outside interference. If you take the government's explanation at face value, this law seems to be about nothing more than protecting tradition and family. But a closer look suggests it is also a calculated political move. Burkina Faso is facing multiple crises. Terrorist violence has not subsided. Millions of people have been displaced. The economy is near collapse, and the military government is under international criticism for delaying democratic elections. In this context, the anti-homosexuality law can be seen as a tool to divert public attention. It allows Ibrahim Traoré to consolidate power by appealing to conservative and religious groups, forces that hold strong influence within society. At the same time, it creates the image of a tough leader willing to stand up to the West. In fact, this is not the first time governments have used morality laws as a political shield. In many countries, when the economy falters or politics become unstable, leaders often turn to laws framed around morality to regain trust from parts of the population. But the deeper question remains, does this law truly represent the traditional values of an entire nation, or is it simply a power play disguised in the language of culture? Behind the political debates and sensational headlines, this law brings very real consequences, and they are already affecting the daily lives of people in Burkina Faso. Economically, the biggest risk is the loss of international aid. Burkina Faso heavily depends on support from the US, the European Union, and global organizations. A cut in aid, even a few $100 million, could push an already fragile economy to collapse. Socially, the law creates an atmosphere of fear. The LGBT community not only lives with anxiety, but also faces discrimination, ostracism, and even violence from those around them. It strips away personal freedom while eroding fragile bonds within an already unstable society. Politically, Burkina Faso may drift further away from democracy. Instead of focusing on organizing free elections and improving governance, the government is prioritizing divisive laws. This raises concerns that the country could remain trapped in a cycle of authoritarianism and isolation. But perhaps the greatest consequence is not found in statistics or diplomatic statements, but in human lives. Every day, there are people forced to hide who they are. Dreams are crushed. Love is turned into a crime, and that kind of pain cannot be captured by headlines alone. The story of Burkina Faso is not just the problem of a distant nation. It is a reminder to the entire world that the freedoms we enjoy today are never guaranteed. In the United States and much of the West, we are used to seeing same-sex couples openly loving each other, protected by law, even allowed to marry. But elsewhere, A simple handhold can be turned into a crime. That contrast forces us to reflect on just how fragile human rights can be. The important lesson is this: freedom is not a permanent gift. It is something that must be defended and upheld every single day. When we take it for granted, when we assume it will always be there, somewhere else in the world, those rights can vanish overnight. At the same time, this story raises a larger global question. How do we balance traditional values with universal human rights? Is it possible to find a path that respects cultural identity without trampling on basic human dignity? That is a conversation not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire world. And it is a conversation that each of us, whether we live in America, Europe, or anywhere else, has a responsibility to take part in.